The camera above our porch was supposed to protect us, but every time a package arrived, it somehow turned away from the front door. My wife and I were already sleeping on the living room sofa, while the woman who came to help was using our bedroom like it belonged to her. She called it care, but little by little, our home stopped feeling like ours. Then our neighbor showed me what his camera had captured from next door. Before the story begins, tell me where you're watching from, and if this touches your heart, please like and subscribe to help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep writing more stories like this. The morning my wife fell in the kitchen, the house did not make a dramatic sound. There was no crash of glass, no scream that tore through the walls, no terrible noise that announced our lives were about to change. Just a soft gasp, the scrape of one slipper against the linoleum, and then the dull thud of Marianne's hip meeting the floor beside the sink. I was in the hallway folding a clean towel when I heard it. For one suspended second I stood still, holding that towel in both hands like my mind had not yet agreed to what my ears had heard. Then I dropped it, and moved as fast as my knees allowed. Marianne was sitting on the kitchen floor, one hand pressed against her left wrist, her gray hair loosened from the clip she always wore in the morning. A thin line of water had spread from the sink toward the stove. She looked more embarrassed than hurt, which somehow frightened me more. "I'm all right," she said before I could ask. She had been saying those words for 46 years, when she burned her finger taking bread from the oven, when she had the flu and still tried to iron my work shirts, when her mother passed, when the doctor told her the arthritis in her hands would only get worse. Marianne Hensley was the kind of woman who apologized to furniture after bumping into it. She did not like making trouble. She did not like needing help. I knelt beside her slowly, feeling the familiar stiffness in my right knee. "Don't move yet," I told her. "I only slipped. I know. It's just water. I know that too." The kitchen around us looked exactly the same as it had 10 minutes earlier. The coffee maker still hissed on the counter. 2 mugs waited near the stove, mine plain white, hers with blue forget-me-nots painted around the rim. The morning light came through the little window above the sink and fell across the table where she had been reading the local paper. But everything felt different because Marianne was on the floor. Our house sat in a quiet neighborhood outside Eugene, Oregon, the kind of place where people waved while taking their trash cans to the curb and knew which dog belonged to which yard. We had lived there for more than 3 decades. It was a 1-story house with a wooden front porch, a row of hydrangeas Marianne tended like family, and a hallway full of framed photographs from years that had somehow passed faster than I could understand. It was not fancy. It was ours. I had spent most of my working life as a security systems maintenance technician at a local hospital. Cameras, door sensors, alarms, old wiring behind newer walls. Those were things I understood. I liked systems because systems told the truth if you knew how to look. A bad connection, a shifted lens, a door that logged the wrong time. Machines rarely lied. People were more complicated. Marianne had worked at a community college library before retiring. She loved quiet rooms, handwritten notes, and books with old paper smell. Even after retirement, she kept a reading chair by our bedroom window and a stack of novels arranged by mood, not alphabet. She said a house should have corners where a person could disappear gently for an hour. That morning, after I helped her into a chair and called the clinic, the doctor said nothing was broken. A bruise on the hip, a strained wrist, rest, ice, a few days using a cane, and someone nearby in case she felt unsteady. That should have been the end of it. But by afternoon, our son Graham was in our kitchen pacing like the fall had cracked the foundation of the house. Graham Hensley was our only child, 50 years old, though I still sometimes saw the boy who used to leave muddy sneakers by the back door. He had my height and Marianne's worried eyes. He worked as an operations manager for a freight company, which meant his phone never stopped buzzing, and every conversation sounded like something he had to squeeze between emergencies. He loved us. I never doubted that. But love, when mixed with guilt, can become careless. "Dad, this can't happen again," he said, glancing toward the living room where Marianne sat with a blanket over her knees. "What if you'd been outside? What if she hit her head?" "She didn't," I said, "but she could have. That's true of almost anything at our age. He looked at me sharply, then softened. I'm not trying to argue. I know. He rubbed the back of his neck. Lena thinks we need a plan. Whenever Graham said Lena thinks, I knew the plan had already traveled farther than discussion. His wife, Lena, arrived 20 minutes later carrying a canvas grocery bag and an expression of practical concern. Lena was polished in a way our house never was. Her coat was cream-colored, her hair smoothed back neatly, and her voice had that careful gentleness people use when they want to sound kind while already having made a decision. She kissed Marianne's cheek, set soup in the refrigerator, and began opening cabinets as if she were taking inventory. Mom, you scared us, she said. Marianne gave a small smile. I scared myself a little. That's why we need to get ahead of this. I noticed the phrase, get ahead of this. It made Marianne's fall sound less like a slip on a wet floor and more like the first stage of a managed decline. Lena did not say nursing home. She did not say unsafe. She did not say burden. She was too smart for that. Instead, she used softer words. Support, temporary, peace of mind, structure. Then she mentioned her sister. Tessa can come for a couple of weeks, Lena said, just while Mom gets her balance back. She's done home health aid work before. She knows medications, fall prevention, all of it. Graham nodded quickly, grateful for something that sounded like an answer. I looked toward Marianne. She had lowered her eyes to the blanket. I knew that look. She was already blaming herself for everyone standing in her living room. We don't need a stranger moving in, I said. She's not a stranger, Lena replied smoothly. She's my sister. That was not the same thing, but nobody in the room seemed interested in the difference. Graham leaned toward me, lowering his voice. Dad, I can't be here during the day. Lena has work. This is just to help. Please. There are moments in old age when people do not take your choices from you directly. They surround you with concern until refusing begins to look selfish. I looked at my wife, at the careful way she held her wrist, at the shame she was trying to hide. All right, I said. A couple of weeks. Marianne closed her eyes for half a second, as though relieved and defeated at the same time. Before sunset, Graham installed 2 new cloud cameras, one above the front porch and one near the garage door. He said they were simple. Everything ran through an app, motion alerts, remote access, 2-factor verification. He showed me the screen once, but most of the settings were tied to his phone. I'll keep the main account, he said. Lena can have admin access so she can check in when I'm busy. I did not like that. Not because I was afraid of cameras. I had maintained hundreds of them. I trusted a well-placed camera more than I trusted most locks. But I had spent my life knowing who controlled a system by knowing who held the access. A camera you could not control was not protection. It was permission for someone else to watch. Still, Marianne was tired. Graham looked desperate to feel useful. Lena stood behind him with folded arms and a faint, approving smile. So I let it pass. Tessa Rowland arrived the next morning. She was in her early 40s, with auburn hair cut just above her shoulders and a face that looked friendly until it rested. Then something flat appeared around the eyes. She wore a soft gray cardigan, carried a large tote bag, and brought a notebook labeled Care Schedule in blue marker. Mr. Hensley, she said, taking both my hands before I had offered them. I'm so glad Lena called me. We're going to make this easier on everyone. Not better. Easier. I remember that now. At the time, it seemed like a harmless word. She moved through the house with efficient warmth. She made tea for Marianne. She wiped the kitchen floor twice. She placed a chair near the hallway so Marianne could pause while walking from the living room to the bathroom. She wrote medication times on a yellow pad and taped it to the refrigerator. Marianne, who was still embarrassed by needing help, thanked her 3 times in the first hour. Oh, honey, don't thank me, Tessa said. This is what family does. Family. That word can open doors no key should open. By noon, Tessa had asked for the Wi-Fi password. By 2, she had asked Graham over the phone to add her to the camera app. By 3, she was standing in our kitchen scrolling through settings on her phone, nodding as though she had been placed in charge of something that had always belonged to her. It's just so I can make sure packages don't get stolen and nobody suspicious comes up the walk, she explained. We've never had trouble with packages, I said. She smiled without looking up. There's a first time for everything. That afternoon I watched her move Marianne's pill organizer from the right side of the sink to the shelf near the microwave. Then she shifted the reading chair in the living room because she said the rug beneath it was a trip hazard. She opened the hall closet and rearranged towels by size. She placed her tote on the small bench where Marianne usually set library books for donation. None of these things were large enough to object to. That was the cleverness of it. A moved chair, a changed shelf, a password shared for safety, a notebook on the counter. Each thing small enough to make complaint seem petty. Together, they changed the shape of the house. By evening, Marianne looked exhausted. I helped her settle into her chair with a pillow behind her back. Tessa stood nearby, pleased with the order she had created. I think we'll have a good system here, she said. I looked around my own living room. The blanket basket had been moved. The side table had been cleared. Marianne's books were stacked differently. The camera app was no longer something Graham controlled alone. A woman who had not slept one night under our roof had already touched nearly every corner of our day. I wanted to say no, not loudly, not angrily. Just no. But Marianne reached for my hand, her fingers cool and tired. She's trying to help, Walt, she whispered. So I swallowed the word. That is how it began. Not with theft. Not with threats. Not with someone forcing open the front door. It began with a wet patch on the kitchen floor, a bruise on my wife's hip, and a woman standing in our home with a caregiver's notebook, calling control by the name of kindness. The first night Marianne slept in the living room, I told myself it made sense. That is how most surrender begins, I suppose. Not with agreement exactly, but with a tired little sentence whispered inside your own head. It makes sense. The sofa bed was closer to the bathroom. The telephone sat on the side table beside the lamp. The kitchen was only a few steps away, and if Marianne needed ice for her wrist in the middle of the night, I could get it without making her walk down the hall. Tessa explained all of this while fluffing pillows with brisk, professional hands. It's just for tonight, she said. No reason to make a big production out of it. A big production. That was how she described a woman wanting to sleep in her own bedroom. Marianne sat in her robe near the front window, watching Tessa pull sheets from the hallway closet. My wife had always been particular about sheets. Not fancy, just clean. Folded properly. Stored with a small lavender sachet tucked between the sets. Tessa grabbed them in bunches, shook them open, and spread them over the sofa mattress like she was making up a guest bed in a place nobody loved. I can walk to the bedroom, Marianne said softly. I know you can, honey, Tessa replied, smiling without slowing down. But being able to do something doesn't mean it's wise. Marianne looked down at her hands. I was standing near the hallway. Close enough to speak, far enough to pretend I was not waiting to see if my wife would look at me for rescue. She did not. That was Marianne's way. She would rather endure discomfort than make someone else feel accused. So I stepped forward. I'll sleep out here with her, I said. Tessa paused, one pillowcase half pulled over a pillow. Mr. Hensley, you don't have to do that. I know. It might be better if you get proper rest in your own bed. Our bed, I said. For the first time that evening, her smile changed. Not enough for Marianne to notice. Just enough for me. A slight tightening at one corner, like I had put my thumb on a bruise. Of course, Tessa said. Your bed. She turned back to the pillow. The sofa mattress sagged in the middle. We had bought it years earlier for visiting cousins who never came anymore. And I had forgotten how thin it was until I stretched out beside Marianne that night. The living room was quiet except for the old refrigerator humming in the kitchen and the faint click of the new porch camera whenever it detected motion outside. Marianne lay facing the back cushions, her injured wrist resting on a folded towel. I'm sorry, she whispered. I turned my head toward her. For what? For causing all this trouble. A person can live with someone for most of a lifetime and still feel pain at hearing them blame themselves for being hurt. You slipped on water, I said. That's all. But now Graham is worried and Lena is rearranging work, And Tessa had to come over. Tessa didn't have to do anything. Marianne went quiet. I regretted the sharpness in my voice. Not because it was wrong, but because my wife was too tired to hold any more tension. After a while, she said, "She is trying to help." Walt. I looked across the dark living room at the hallway leading to our bedroom. The door was half closed. A thin line of light glowed underneath it. "She may be," I said, but I did not sleep. Sometime after midnight, I heard footsteps in our bedroom. Drawers opening. A closet door sliding. The soft thump of something being placed on the floor. I lay still beside Marianne, listening to another person move through the private geography of our life. There are rooms in a house that hold more than furniture. Our bedroom held Marianne's reading chair by the window, the one with the faded green cushion she refused to replace because it had shaped itself to her back. It held the cedar chest at the foot of the bed where she kept old letters tied with ribbon. It held my work watch in the top dresser drawer, scratched across the face from a job I did at the hospital 20 years earlier. It held the ordinary evidence of two people who had stayed. By morning, Tessa had placed a glass of water on Marianne's side table in the living room and called it our new nighttime station. Our. That word landed harder than it should have. The second night, Tessa said the bedroom still needed work. I noticed the rug by the bed curls at the corner. She told Marianne over breakfast, "That's a fall risk, and there are too many cords behind the dresser. We should really get the space safe before you go back in. I could just be careful," Marianne said. Tessa touched her shoulder. "You already tried being careful, sweetheart." I saw Marianne absorb that sentence like a slap she had been trained to call advice. By the third day, Tessa's tote bag had become a small suitcase. By the fifth, the suitcase had become a rolling bag tucked beside our dresser. By the end of the week, a row of her clothes hung in the left side of our closet, where Marianne kept her church dresses. When I asked about it, Tessa gave a little laugh. "Oh, I just needed a place to hang a few things so they don't wrinkle. I'm sure you don't want me looking sloppy while I'm here." It was the kind of answer that left no clean place to object. If I said no, I was ungenerous. If I said yes, the closet became less ours. So I said nothing. That silence bothered me. I had not been a silent man in my working years. At the hospital, if a fire door failed to latch or a camera feed dropped, I wrote reports people did not enjoy reading. I believed in naming problems before they became emergencies. But inside my own home, surrounded by the language of care, I found myself measuring every word. Tessa did not take over by force. She took over by making resistance look unreasonable. She moved Marianne's cane from the hallway hook to a basket near the sofa because that's where you'll reach for it first. She shifted our bedroom lamp to the living room side table because the light is better for nighttime. She placed a plastic bin labeled Marianne Daily Needs beside the television, filling it with tissues, lotion, medication bottles, a hairbrush, and the little prayer book Marianne kept in her nightstand. When Marianne saw that prayer book in the bin, she touched the cover with 2 fingers. "I usually keep this by the bed," she said. Tessa was writing something in her care notebook. "And now, your bed is out here." For a little while, the words hung there. "Your bed is out here." Marianne did not answer. She only picked up the prayer book and held it in her lap, like something rescued from a flood. That was the moment I understood the injury was no longer her wrist. It was not the bruise on her hip or the fear of slipping again. It was the slow humiliation of being relocated inside her own home, piece by piece, until even her sacred little objects were brought to her like supplies in a hospital room. I wanted to stand up then. I wanted to walk down the hall, open our bedroom door, and carry every one of Tessa's things back to the front porch. Instead, I looked at Marianne. She was staring at the prayer book, her mouth pressed into a thin line, fighting not to cry in front of a woman who would turn tears into evidence. So I made a decision I did not like. I would not give Tessa a scene. Not yet. A scene would help her. She could tell Lena I was agitated. She could tell Graham I was not adjusting well. She could tilt her head in that practiced way and say, "I'm worried about your father, too." I had spent too many years around security reports not to understand documentation. The person who writes the first version of events often controls how everyone else reads the truth. So I swallowed my anger and began keeping my own record. Not on my phone, not in a computer, on paper. I took an old maintenance notebook from the garage, the kind with a black cover and grid-lined pages. I wrote dates, times, what changed, who said what, when Tessa moved an item, when Lena called and asked questions that sounded casual but were not. On Thursday, Graham stopped by after work. He stood in the living room doorway, still wearing his company jacket, looking tired and relieved in the same breath. Marianne smiled at him from the sofa bed. Tessa had propped pillows behind her and placed a tray across her lap, making the whole scene look organized, almost tender, if you did not know what had been taken to create it. "Mom, you look comfortable," Graham said. Marianne's smile flickered. "I'm all right." There it was again. "I'm all right." The most dangerous sentence in our marriage. I watched Graham glance down the hallway toward our bedroom. The door was open just enough for him to see Tessa's rolling bag near the dresser. He saw it. I know he did. His eyes paused there, then moved away. That was Graham's weakness. He did not fail us because he did not love us. He failed us because seeing the truth would require him to do something difficult. "Tessa says the living room setup is safer for now," he said. "Tessa says a lot," I replied. He frowned. "Dad." "Just that." A warning wrapped in a son's tired voice. Lena arrived a few minutes later, carrying a folder of printed articles about fall prevention. She kissed Marianne on the cheek, praised Tessa for the system, and told Graham they should consider making the arrangement last until Marianne was fully steady. "Just temporary," Lena said. I looked at the rolling bag in my bedroom. Temporary had started hanging clothes in our closet. That evening, after they left, I went outside to check the porch camera. The camera was mounted above the front door, small and black, with a glossy face that reflected the porch light. Graham had installed it straight. I remembered because I had watched him use a level. Now it pointed slightly left, away from the walkway, and toward Marianne's hydrangeas. I stood beneath it for a long moment. A camera does not drift by itself. Not like that. Not from a level mount. Wind might shake it. A loose screw might drop its angle downward. But this had been turned sideways by hand. I reached up and adjusted it back toward the walkway. The next afternoon, it was turned again. That day, a package sat beside the front door when I went out to bring in the mail. A small brown box. No company name I recognized. The label face down. "Tessa!" I called, carrying it inside. Something came. She appeared from the hallway too quickly. "Oh, I've got it," she said, taking the box from my hands before I could turn it over. "Probably supplies." "What supplies?" "For Marianne." Marianne looked up from the sofa. "For me?" Tessa smiled brightly. "Just little things, to make life easier." She carried the box down the hall toward our bedroom. Not the kitchen. Not the living room where Marianne was lying. Our bedroom. I watched her disappear through the doorway and close the door behind her. After a minute, Marianne said, "Maybe it's something nice." Her voice was small, hopeful in a way that hurt to hear. "Maybe," I said. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Porch camera turned left again. Package delivered. Label hidden." Tessa took it to bedroom. I underlined bedroom twice. By the end of the second week, the living room no longer looked like a room where someone was recovering. It looked like a room where someone had been moved. Marianne's slippers were under the sofa. Her pill bottles sat in the plastic bin. Her robe hung over the back of a dining chair. The side table held water, tissues, a bell Tessa had placed there, just in case, and the prayer book that no longer lived beside her bed. Our bedroom door stayed closed more often than open. Sometimes I heard Tessa speaking on the phone inside. Sometimes I heard drawers. Once, I heard laughter. I began checking the porch camera every morning. Some days it pointed correctly. On days when packages came, it seemed to find the hydrangeas more interesting than the walkway. I did not have the app access to prove anything. I did not have receipts. I did not know what was in the boxes. All I had was a shifted camera, a closed bedroom door, and the growing certainty that kindness had become a lock we had allowed someone else to turn. On the 11th night, Marianne woke beside me on the sofa just after 2 in the morning. "Walt," she whispered, "I'm here. I want my room back." She did not say it angrily. That would have been easier. She said it like a confession. Like wanting her own bed had become something shameful. I reached for her hand beneath the blanket. In the hallway, the bedroom door was closed. A thin strip of light glowed underneath, just as it had that first night. "I know," I said. But this time, I did not tell myself it made sense. For 2 days after Marianne whispered that she wanted her room back, I carried those words around like something fragile in my shirt pocket. Not because I had forgotten them, because I could not afford to act on them too soon. That was the cruelest part. A younger man might have thrown open the bedroom door, dragged Tessa's suitcase into the hall, and told her to leave before supper. A younger man might have trusted volume to do the work of truth. But age teaches you that the loudest man in a room is not always the one people believe. Tessa had already built her version of the story. She was the helpful caregiver. Lena was the organized daughter-in-law. Graham was the worried son. Marianne was fragile after a fall, and I was the old husband who did not like change. If I shouted, I would fit the part they had quietly written for me. So I kept writing in my notebook. Camera turned left again. Package on porch, label down. Bedroom door closed. Tessa on phone, laughing. Marianne asked for blue sweater. Tessa said she would check later. Each line looked small on paper. Too small, maybe. But I had spent my life around systems, and I knew most failures began as small entries nobody wanted to connect. On the 15th morning after Marianne's fall, I stepped outside to take the trash bins to the curb. The air was damp in the way Oregon mornings often are, not raining exactly, but heavy enough to bead on the sleeves of my jacket. Marianne's hydrangeas drooped along the porch rail, their pale blue heads darkened by mist. The porch camera was pointed at them again. I looked up at it, then down the street. A delivery van was already rolling away from our curb. A box sat beside the door. This one was long and flat, wrapped in brown cardboard with a white shipping label turned toward the siding. I did not touch it right away. I stood there with the trash bin handle in my hand and felt something inside me settle into a colder shape. Before I could move, the front door opened behind me. "Oh good," Tessa said. That came early. She stepped around me wearing Marianne's quilted house slippers. Not similar slippers. Marianne's slippers. They were pale blue with worn fabric at the heel, the kind she wore only inside because she said the soles were too soft for porch boards. Seeing them on Tessa's feet did something to me that no package had done yet. It made the whole thing feel less like intrusion and more like possession. "Tessa," I said, keeping my voice level. She looked down, noticed where my eyes had gone, and smiled, as if she had been caught borrowing sugar. "Oh, Marianne said I could use these." My feet were freezing last night. From the living room, Marianne called weakly. I didn't mind. Of course she didn't. Marianne would have given away her blanket to someone who complained of a chill while she sat shivering. Tessa bent, picked up the box, and tucked it against her hip before I could see the label. "Supplies?" I asked. She turned toward the door. "You ask a lot of questions for a man who says he wants help." It was the first time she said something without wrapping it in sweetness. Then the sweetness returned. "I'll put this away," she added. "You don't need to worry about every little thing." Every little thing. The box disappeared into the bedroom. I rolled the trash bin to the curb slowly. Across the narrow strip of wet grass between our driveway and the neighbor's fence, Earl Whitcomb stood beside his mailbox with a stack of envelopes in one hand. Earl had lived next door since before Graham graduated high school. He was 76, tall but slightly stooped now, with a white mustache that never seemed fully trimmed and hands permanently rough from a lifetime of weather. Before retirement, he had carried mail for the postal service, and even now, he moved through the neighborhood with the watchful quiet of a man who had learned every house by route, habit, and porch light. He did not wave right away. He was looking at my front door, then at the camera above it, then at me. "Morning, Walt," he said. "Morning." The way he said my name told me he had been waiting for a chance to say more. He crossed his lawn slowly, not hurrying, not making it look like a visit. Earl understood discretion. Mail carriers know the private weight of what arrives at people's doors. He stopped near the low fence between our yards. "Your camera working all right?" he asked. I kept one hand on the trash bin handle. "Why?" He shifted the envelopes under his arm. Just wondered. He scratched the side of his jaw, eyes moving briefly toward our front porch. "Things been facing Marianne's hydrangeas a lot lately." For a moment, neither of us spoke. There are questions that become answers, if they are asked at the right time. I looked back at the camera. "You notice that?" "I notice Porch's," Earl said. "Old habit." A car passed behind him, tires hissing softly on the damp street. Inside my house, I heard the faint sound of Tessa's voice, probably on the phone again, muffled through walls that suddenly felt too thin. Earl lowered his voice. "You and Marianne doing okay?" The polite answer rose automatically. "We're fine." I had said versions of it for days. To Graham. To Lena. To myself. It was a sentence older people learned to keep others comfortable, but Earl was not asking to be comforted. He was asking like a man who had already seen enough to be worried. I looked at his mailbox, at the stack of envelopes, at his old brown cardigan buttoned unevenly against the morning damp. "No," I said. "Not exactly." He nodded once. "No surprise, no dramatic reaction. My back porch camera catches part of your walk," he said. "I put it in after those package thefts last winter. Didn't mean to point it at your place, but the angle gets the street, your porch steps, and the end of your driveway." My pulse did not jump. It slowed. That told me something. I had been waiting for another pair of eyes without admitting it. "Did it catch something?" I asked. Earl glanced toward our front window. "Maybe. Maybe not. Depends what you're looking for." I looked toward the living room. Through the glass, I could see Marianne sitting on the sofa with the blanket over her knees. Tessa moved behind her, crossing the hall with the confidence of someone who no longer considered herself a guest. "I'm looking for the truth," I said. Earl's face changed then, but only a little. His eyes softened around the edges. "Come over tonight," he said. "After supper. Bring a flash drive if you've got one." I did not answer immediately. The invitation was simple, neighborly even. But accepting it meant admitting the problem had stepped outside our walls. It meant our humiliation had become visible from another house. That should have embarrassed me. Instead, it gave me air. That evening I told Tessa I needed a walk after dinner. She was at the kitchen counter wiping a surface she had already wiped twice. "In the dark?" "It's 7 o'clock, I said. "Not midnight. Your balance isn't what it used to be." "My balance is fine." She looked toward Marianne, then back at me. "Maybe just around the block." I buttoned my jacket. "Maybe." Marianne watched from the sofa. Her eyes followed me with quiet worry. I wanted to tell her where I was going, but Tessa stood too close. So I only gave my wife a small nod, the kind of nod married people develop after years of leaving rooms without needing explanations. Outside, the evening had settled cold and blue over the neighborhood. Porch lights glowed under eaves. A television flickered behind someone's curtains. The wet pavement held the reflection of street lamps in broken streaks. I did not walk around the block. I crossed the lawn to Earl's side door. He opened before I knocked, as if he had been watching for me. His house smelled of coffee, old wood, and the faint sweetness of banana bread. It was smaller than ours, with fewer decorations, but every object seemed to have earned its place. A raincoat hung by the door. A pair of reading glasses sat beside a folded newspaper. On the kitchen table, his laptop was already open. "You want coffee?" he asked. "No, thank you." "You sure?" "It's bad coffee, but it's hot." Despite myself, I almost smiled. "Maybe later." He nodded and sat down heavily in the chair by the laptop. I pulled the last 2 weeks. The screen showed a grainy black and white view of the street between our houses. Earl's camera was mounted under his back porch roof, angled just enough to catch his driveway and the side of our front walk. My porch appeared at the edge of the frame, not centered, not invasive, but enough. Enough can be a powerful word. Earl clicked a folder labeled Motion Clips. First one I thought was odd was last Tuesday, he said. The clip opened. There was our porch, pale in the early morning light. Tessa stepped out in Marianne's blue cardigan, phone in one hand. She looked toward the street, then up at our camera. She reached above the door, placed her fingers on the camera body, and turned it slowly toward the hydrangeas. I felt my jaw tighten. A delivery van arrived 4 minutes later. The driver carried a small padded envelope to the porch. Tessa opened the door before he could knock. She took the envelope, signed the handheld device, and glanced once toward the shifted camera. Then she went inside. Earl did not speak. He clicked another clip. This one showed Tessa receiving 2 boxes. She stacked them quickly, turned one label against her sweater, and slipped back inside. A third clip showed her stepping out before a delivery arrived, checking the street, then adjusting the camera. Another showed her signing something with a quick movement of her hand. Earl paused the video and enlarged the frame. The signature pad was too blurry to read, but the delivery label on the top box was not. M. Hensley. Marianne's Nama. I leaned closer to the screen. For a few seconds, the kitchen around me disappeared. I saw only those letters. Not because it proved everything. It did not. A package addressed to Marianne could be innocent. A caregiver receiving it could be explained. A camera angle could be dismissed. But together, the pieces were beginning to look like a handprint. Earl looked at me. You know about those orders? No. Marianne? No. He sat back, folding his arms over his chest. Didn't think so. The next clip was the one that made my stomach turn. It had been recorded 2 afternoons earlier, the day I had adjusted the camera back toward the walkway. The video showed me leaving the porch, going inside, closing the door. 10 minutes later, Tessa came out. She stood very still for a moment, listening or watching. Then she looked directly toward Earl's side of the street. Not at his camera, exactly, but close. Then she turned our camera away again. There was something in that small movement that chilled me more than the packages. It was not careless. It was routine. She had done it enough times to believe the motion belonged to her. Earl clicked pause. On the screen, Tessa's hand rested on the camera above our front door. Marianne's hydrangeas filled half the frame. I'm sorry, Walt, Earl said. I did not look away from the image. For what? For having to show you this. I swallowed. What I felt then was not surprise. It was not even anger, not fully. It was grief of a quieter kind. The grief of realizing your home has become a place where evidence must be gathered. Can you copy them? I asked. Already started. He inserted a small USB drive into the laptop. His hands moved slowly but surely. Earl was not a technical man in the way I had been, but he had the patience of someone who had sorted mail through snowstorms, addressed mistakes, and barking dogs. He named the folder Hensley Porch Clips and added the dates one by one. While the files copied, he stood and took 2 mugs from the cabinet. I know you said no coffee, he said, but you're getting some anyway. This time I did not argue. We sat at the kitchen table while the progress bar crawled across the screen. Earl slid 1 mug toward me. The coffee was bitter, overcooked, and exactly what I needed. Has Graham seen any of this? He asked. No. You planning to tell him? Not yet. Earl studied me over the rim of his mug. You think he won't believe you? I think he'll want not to. That was the most honest answer I had spoken in days. Earl nodded slowly. Wanting not to know is a powerful thing. He said it like a man who had learned that lesson somewhere private. I did not ask. The USB finished copying. Earl ejected it properly, placed it in my palm, and closed my fingers around it. Keep it somewhere she won't find it, he said. I will. And Walt? I looked up. Don't confront her alone. The words were simple. Neighbor to neighbor. But they carried weight. Earl had not called me foolish. He had not told me what to do. He had only recognized that a man can be in danger even inside a house he owns. I put the USB in my jacket pocket. When I stepped back outside, the cold air hit my face. Our house stood 20 yards away, lit from within. Through the living room window, I saw Marianne's outline on the sofa. Tessa moved behind her, crossing from the hallway to the kitchen. For the first time since this began, I did not feel completely alone. But I also felt something else. Sane. That was harder than I expected. It is one thing to know your dignity is being taken. It is another thing to realize your neighbor has watched the shape of it happen from across a camera lens. I stood in Earl's driveway for a moment, hand over the USB in my pocket, and let that shame pass through me without obeying it. Shame protects the wrong people if you let it keep you quiet. I walked back across the lawn. Inside, Tessa looked up from the kitchen counter. That was a short walk. I got cold. She studied my face. You should be careful going out alone. I was. Marianne turned her head toward me. Her eyes asked a question she could not ask out loud. I gave her the smallest nod. Not enough for Tessa to notice. Enough for Marianne. Later, after Tessa closed our bedroom door for the night and the strip of light appeared under it again, I took the USB from my jacket and held it in my palm. It looked ordinary. Black plastic, no heavier than a house key. But for the first time, our truth had left the walls of our home and come back with a witness. I took the maintenance notebook from beneath the sofa cushion and opened to a fresh page. Then I wrote, Earl has video. The next morning I woke before the house did. That had become my safest hour. Before Tessa's footsteps in our bedroom. Before the cabinet doors opened and closed in her new rhythm. Before Lena's name flashed on Graham's phone and turned into another instruction delivered through concern. Before Marianne smiled too politely at a woman who had no right wearing her slippers. The living room was gray with early light. Marianne slept beside me on the sofa bed, one hand tucked under her cheek, her injured wrist resting on a folded towel. Her face looked softer in sleep, less guarded. For a moment, I could almost pretend we had chosen to camp in our own living room as a strange little adventure. Then I saw the plastic bin labeled Marianne Daily Needs sitting beside the television. The pretending ended. I eased myself up slowly so the sofa frame would not creak. My black maintenance notebook was under the cushion where I had hidden it the night before. The USB from Earl sat inside my jacket pocket, still wrapped in the paper napkin he had given me to keep it from sliding loose. I took both with me into the kitchen. The kitchen had always belonged to Marianne in a way that had nothing to do with ownership. She knew which cabinet hinge squeaked in winter, which burner ran too hot, which mug I reached for, without looking. Now little yellow notes marked drawers and shelves. Tessa's handwriting was everywhere. Cups, medication, fall risk, keep floor clear. I stood there with my notebook in my hand, staring at a label stuck to the drawer where Marianne kept dish towels. Lin's, as if we were guests in a rental house. I opened the refrigerator and poured orange juice into a glass, not because I wanted it, but because I needed a reason to be standing there when Tessa came out. She appeared at 6:30, wearing a robe I had never seen before, and carrying her phone. Her hair was still damp from a shower taken in our bathroom. She stopped when she saw me. "You're up early." "I usually am." She glanced at the counter, at my jacket on the chair, then at me. "Going somewhere?" "The library." Her expression did not change much, but her thumb stopped moving on the phone screen. "The library? Marianne has books due." That part was true. There were always books due in our life, even when we forgot what day it was. "I can return them for you," Tessa said. "I know. I mean, it's cold out. And you shouldn't be doing errands alone if you're tired." "I'm not tired." She smiled, patient as a nurse in a brochure. "Walter, you've been under a lot of stress." It was the first time she used my first name without invitation. He let it pass over me. "Marianne likes the little stamp they use on the return receipt," I said. I told her I'd get one. That was also true, though not the reason. Tessa looked toward the living room. Marianne was still asleep. Then she gave me that small tilt of the head I had come to dislike. "All right, but don't be long. We're trying to keep a routine." Routine. Every word she chose made the walls lean inward. I put on my jacket, slid the notebook and USB into the inside pocket, and picked up the canvas tote where Marianne kept library books. On my way out, I paused by the front porch camera. It was pointing correctly that morning. No packages yet. No reason to turn it. The drive to the library took 12 minutes. I had made that drive hundreds of times when Marianne worked there. After she retired, we still went every Friday because she said retirement did not mean a person should stop having due dates. The building sat near a row of maple trees, a low brick structure with wide windows, and a flagpole that clicked softly in the wind. It was not grand. It was ordinary in the best way, a place where quiet still had value. When I walked through the sliding doors, the smell hit me first. Paper, dust, carpet shampoo, old coffee from the staff room. I had not realized how much I needed to be somewhere Tessa had not touched. The front desk had changed over the years, but one face remained familiar. Nora Pike stood behind the returns counter, sorting a stack of books with the brisk gentleness of someone who believed objects deserved care. She was in her mid-60s, short, with silver hair cut in a neat bob and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. Marianne used to say Nora could silence a room with one raised eyebrow and comfort a crying student with the same expression. She looked up as I approached. "Walter Hensley," she said, and her face opened with real warmth. "Now, there's a man I haven't seen enough of. Nora." She came around the counter and touched my arm. Not hugging, not making a production. Just touching, like confirming I was there. "How's Marianne?" That question nearly undid me, because it sounded like concern without an agenda. "She had a fall," I said. "Nothing broken." "Oh, I'm sorry." Nora's eyes sharpened a little. "Is she recovering?" "She is." The answer was not a lie. It was only incomplete. I placed the books on the counter. Nora scanned them one by one. The machine gave its small, pleasant beep with each return. She printed the receipt and held it out. "For Marianne," she said. "She's still saving these?" "She says they prove she kept her promises." Nora smiled. "That sounds like her." I folded the receipt carefully and placed it in my shirt pocket. Then I did not move. Nora noticed. Good librarians notice pauses better than most people notice speech. "Walter," she said quietly. "Do you need something else?" I looked past her toward the rows of public computers. A man in a baseball cap read news headlines. A woman near the window typed with 2 fingers. Farther back, the printer hummed and released pages into a tray. "I need to print some account statements," I said. "And I may need help doing it without making mistakes." Nora did not ask why in front of the desk. She only nodded. "Come with me." She led me to a computer near the reference section, one partly shielded by a tall shelf of travel guides. She pulled out the chair, then stopped herself, perhaps remembering I did not need to be treated like a patient. Instead, she stepped aside. "Take your time," she said. "I'll be close." I sat down and opened the browser. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. It was strange. I had maintained alarm panels, rewired camera feeds, diagnosed failing door sensors from 3 floors away. But sitting at that library computer, about to open our credit card account, I felt like a man entering a room where someone might already be hiding. I typed the bank website carefully. Username, password. The system asked for verification. My phone received the code. That was a relief. At least this account still recognized me. I entered the 6 digits. The dashboard opened. For a few seconds, all I saw were numbers and dates. Ordinary columns, the kind of financial clutter every household collects. Grocery store, pharmacy, gas station, electric bill. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would make a person gasp. Then I scrolled. $38.74 beauty supply. $64.19 online marketplace. $119. 62 apparel. $247.08 electronics accessory. Heltreds digital gift card. Heltreds digital gift card. 800 digital gift card. Another marketplace charge. Another beauty supply. A subscription I did not recognize. A pickup locker location near the grocery store 2 miles from our house. I felt my hands grow cold. The amounts were not large enough to scream. That was the point, they whispered. They hid between the legitimate charges, small enough to look like the ordinary mess of recovery after a fall. medical tape, ice packs, a new bath mat, maybe a raised toilet seat. A person glancing quickly might not stop, but I was not glancing. I began writing each charge in the notebook. Date, amount, merchant, delivery method if shown. The list lengthened. Nora appeared beside me with a yellow legal pad and a pen. "For your notes," she said. I looked up at her. She did not look at the screen. That was her kindness. She gave me privacy while still standing near enough to help. "Thank you," I said. She placed the pad down. "And Walter?" "Yes. If something is wrong, don't let embarrassment keep you from naming it." I looked at the charges on the screen. Embarrassment. It had been sitting in the room with me for days. Not loud, not useful. A heavy old coat someone had draped over my shoulders and called dignity. I had been ashamed that we were sleeping in our living room, ashamed that Earl had seen our porch become evidence, ashamed that I had let a woman move into our bedroom under the banner of care. But shame, I was beginning to understand, was loyal to whoever benefited from silence. I clicked on the first suspicious transaction and opened the details. The billing name was Marianne Hensley. The delivery confirmation email was not ours. I leaned closer. The email address began with a name I recognized. Lena. Not her main email, but one she used for family documents and holiday planning. I had seen it in group messages before. My throat tightened. I opened another charge. Same backup email. Another. Same. Then I found the phone verification page. There, beneath my number, was a secondary contact number added 8 days earlier. Lena's Shell. For a minute, I did not move. I had expected Tessa's fingerprints. I had expected maybe a careless saved card, an order history, a package trail. I had not expected Lena's number sitting inside our account like a key left under the mat. It did not prove she had bought the items, but it proved she had opened the door. I thought of Graham saying Lena thinks we need a plan. I thought of Lena's cream-colored coat. Her careful voice. Her words laid one after another like stepping stones across our objections. Support. Temporary. Peace of mind. Structure. Now those words had a phone number. Nora returned when she heard the printer begin spitting pages into the tray. She gathered them neatly, turned them face down, and slid them into a folder without reading. "I put them in order," she said. "Thank you. You want me to call Marianne later, just to say hello?" The question seemed simple, friendly, but I suddenly saw how isolated Marianne had become. Her books had been returned by me. Her phone calls screened by Tessa. Her prayer book placed in a plastic bin. Her own bedroom locked behind another woman's routine. "Yes," I said, "but not today." Nora studied my face. "All right, I need to understand what I'm looking at first." She nodded. "Then you should not do that alone for too long." There it was again. The same truth Earl had offered in different words. Do not confront her alone. Do not carry this alone. Old men are often praised for independence until independence becomes a cage. I printed 3 months of statements. Then order confirmations from the email account that still showed our household purchases. I found a recent message confirming a delivery to a pickup locker. The item description was vague, but the merchant sold designer cosmetics. Another confirmation showed wireless earbuds. Another showed a compact espresso machine. None of them were things Marianne had asked for. None of them were things I had ordered. At the bottom of one receipt was a note. Gift options selected. I almost laughed then, but the sound would have come out wrong. A gift. Bought with our card. Maybe wrapped in our name. Maybe carried through our front door while our camera stared at flowers. Nora helped me make copies of everything. She did not hover. She did not pity me. When the printer jammed, she fixed it with 2 sharp pulls and a muttered complaint about cheap toner. That ordinary irritation steadied me more than any sympathy could have. At the end, she clipped the statements together and placed them in a plain manila folder. "Do you want an envelope?" she asked. "Yes." She brought one from behind the desk and wrote nothing on it. No label, no name. "Plain is better sometimes," she said. I slid the folder into Marianne's canvas tote beneath the returned book receipt. Before I left, Nora touched the top of the tote. Tell Marianne I miss arguing with her about late fees. She'll like that. And Walter? I looked at her. You still have your library card? In my wallet. Good. That means you still belong somewhere. It was such a small sentence, almost odd. But I understood what she meant. For 2 weeks, our house had been teaching us that belonging could be revoked by someone with a notebook, a password, and a confident voice. Nora, standing under fluorescent lights beside a cart of returned books, reminded me that there were places where Marianne and I had not been reduced to problems to manage. I drove home slowly. At a red light, I opened the tote just enough to look at the edge of the envelope. Earl's USB was in my jacket pocket. The statements were beneath Marianne's books. My maintenance notebook rested on the passenger seat. For the first time, I had more than suspicion. I had dates, amounts, emails, a phone number, a pattern. When I pulled into the driveway, Tessa was standing on the porch. She had her arms folded against the cold. Above her, the camera pointed straight toward the walkway. For once, it looked exactly as it should. That made me trust it less. You were gone a long time, she said. The printer was slow. Her eyes moved to the canvas tote. Lots of books? Enough. She reached for it. I can put those away. I shifted the tote to my other hand. No, I said. I've got it. It was only 2 words, but they changed the air between us. Tessa's fingers remained suspended for a second, curled around nothing. Then she smiled. Of course. Inside, Marianne looked up from the sofa. I set the tote beside her and took out the library receipt first. Nora printed this for you, I said. Marianne held it like a small treasure. She remembered? She remembered. A little color returned to my wife's face. Not much. Enough. Tessa watched from the kitchen. I carried the tote down the hall, not to our bedroom, but to the coat closet. I opened the door, reached behind the old winter blankets on the upper shelf, and placed the envelope where Tessa would have no reason to look. Later, when I was alone for a moment, I moved the USB there too. Video and paper. Witness and pattern. I closed the closet door quietly. Then I returned to the living room and sat beside Marianne on the sofa bed. She looked at me, asking without words. I leaned close enough that only she could hear. Nora says she misses arguing with you about late fees. Marianne's eyes filled. Not because of the joke, because someone outside this room still remembered her as more than a woman recovering from a fall. I reached for her hand. In the kitchen, Tessa began washing a cup that was already clean. The water ran too loudly. But beneath that sound, beneath the performance of care and order, I could feel the truth gathering weight. Not enough to drop yet. Enough to hold. Lena called the next afternoon. I knew it was her before Tessa handed me the phone because Tessa's voice changed when she answered. It became lighter, almost cheerful, like the two of them were standing on the same side of a counter, and I was the customer. Walter, Tessa said, holding the phone out. It's Lena. She wants to talk about dinner. I took the phone without reaching too fast. Hello. Dad, Lena said, using the name she had adopted after marrying Graham, though it had never quite sounded natural in her mouth. I was thinking we should all sit down tonight, nothing formal. Just family. We need to talk about Mom's recovery plan. Recovery plan. Not Marianne. Not your mother. Pilan. I looked across the living room. Marianne was resting on the sofa, with Nora's library receipt tucked inside her prayer book like a pressed flower. Since I had brought it home, she had taken it out 3 times, not to read anything important, only to touch the small printed date at the bottom. I thought she was recovering, I said. She is, Lena replied quickly. That's exactly why we should get ahead of the next stage. Graham is worried. I'm worried. Tessa has been doing so much. But we can't just drift along without structure. There was that word again. Structure. People used it when they wanted control to sound clean. What next stage? I asked. A small pause. Well, maybe assisted living for a short rehab period. Not permanently. Just a month or 2. Mom would have professional support, and Tessa could stay at the house to keep things organized until she comes back. There it was. Not all of it. Not yet, but enough. A plan to move Marianne out of the house while Tessa remained inside it. I looked at the coat closet down the hall, where Earl's USB and the manila envelope from the library were hidden behind winter blankets. I could have ended the conversation right there. I could have told Lena what I knew, named the charges, mentioned the phone number added to our credit card account. But truth used too early becomes a warning. So I said, "What time?" 6:30. "I'll bring dinner." When I hung up, Tessa was watching me from the kitchen. She pretended to wipe the counter, but the sponge had not moved in several seconds. "Sounds nice," she said. "Does it?" Her eyes lifted. "Family dinners are important." I glanced toward our bedroom door, closed as usual in the middle of the day. So is knowing whose house you're eating in. The sponge began moving again. For the rest of the afternoon, the house changed shape around the coming dinner. Tessa became energetic, almost bright. She opened cabinets, pulled out serving dishes Marianne had not used in months, and set the dining table with the good plates. Not the holiday china, but the white plates with blue rims Marianne liked because they made simple food look cared for. Marianne watched from the sofa. "I can help fold the napkins," she said. Tessa smiled over her shoulder. "You just rest." "I'm not helpless." "No one said you were." But the words were already doing the work. I stood near the window, pretending to check the weather. Outside, the porch camera faced the walkway properly. No deliveries that day. No boxes. No reason for Tessa to touch it. Inside, however, she was staging something. The chicken went into the oven. A salad appeared in a glass bowl. She placed a small vase of grocery store flowers in the center of the table and stepped back to admire the effect. If a stranger had walked in, they would have seen a devoted caregiver preparing a warm meal for an elderly couple and their family. That was what made it dangerous. Abuse did not always look like a raised voice or a locked door. Sometimes it smelled like roasted chicken and came with folded napkins. Graham arrived first, 10 minutes late, carrying a bouquet of yellow tulips that looked as tired as he did. He still had his work badge clipped to his belt and a crease across his forehead from the kind of day that never fully ends. When Marianne saw the flowers, she smiled with real pleasure. "Oh, Graham, thought you might like these, Mom." He looked around for a vase. That was when I saw the first crack. He turned toward the corner cabinet where Marianne always kept the tall blue vase. The cabinet was empty. He checked the sideboard. Nothing. His eyes moved toward the hallway, toward the closed bedroom door. Tessa noticed. "I put some of the fragile things away," she said, "just for safety." Graham nodded too quickly. "Right, that makes sense." But he kept holding the flowers. Marianne lifted one hand slightly. "The blue vase is in my room, I think." "My room." She said it naturally, then stopped, as if the phrase had become uncertain. Tessa took the tulips from Graham. "I'll find something." She disappeared down the hall into our bedroom without asking. Graham watched her go. This time, his eyes did not move away as fast. Lena arrived with a folder tucked under one arm and a casserole dish in both hands. She kissed Marianne's cheek, greeted me with a careful smile, and praised Tessa before taking off her coat. "This looks wonderful," she said. "You've done so much." Tessa gave a small laugh. "Just trying to keep things calm." Calm. I wondered when my house had become a place everyone praised for being quiet. We sat at the dining table for the first time since Marianne's fall. I helped my wife from the sofa to her chair, moving slowly, letting her set the pace. Tessa hovered near her elbow. "I've got her," I said. "I know, I've got her." The second time, she stepped back. Marianne lowered herself into her chair and exhaled softly, as though sitting at her own dining table had become an achievement. Graham noticed that too. Dinner began with ordinary words. Work. Weather. A road closure on Willamette Street. Graham talked about a delayed shipment at his company. Lena asked Marianne whether her wrist still hurt. Tessa served chicken as if she had always stood at the head of that table. I let them talk. There is value in silence when people are filling it with the evidence of who they are. After a while, Lena set down her fork and opened the folder beside her plate. "Before everyone gets too tired," she said, "I thought we could talk through a few options." Graham rubbed his forehead. "Lena, maybe not during dinner. It's better to discuss things when we're all together." Tessa nodded. "I agree. A consistent plan helps prevent setbacks. Marianne looked down at her plate. I looked at Graham. He was staring at the folder, not at his mother. Lena pulled out a printed brochure for a short-term assisted living program. It's not a nursing home, she said quickly. It's more like rehab support. Just temporary. Mom could have help at night, meals, supervision. And Tessa could stay here to keep the house from becoming chaotic while everyone adjusts. The house isn't chaotic, I said. No one means it that way, Graham murmured. I turned to him. Then what way do you mean it? He looked uncomfortable. Dad, we just want Mom safe. Marianne's fork touched her plate with a faint sound. I feel safest here, she said. No one answered her right away. That silence told me more than any argument could have. Tessa leaned forward, voice soft. Honey, feeling safe and being safe are not always the same thing. I watched Marianne shrink a little. Not physically. She was still sitting upright. But something in her face pulled inward. That was when I decided to place the first stone on the table. Not the USB, not the statements. Just a question. Tessa, I said, where did you put the blood pressure monitor you ordered? Her expression did not change, but her hand paused over the serving spoon. The what? The new blood pressure monitor. You said a package last week was supplies for Marianne. I assumed that was part of it. Oh. She gave a light laugh. Yes. I still need to unpack some things. Where is it? In the bedroom, I think. Marianne looked up. I haven't seen a new blood pressure monitor. Tessa smiled at her. You've had a lot going on. I would remember that. The room quieted. For the first time since Tessa entered our house, Marianne had contradicted her in front of everyone. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. But it moved through the room like a match being struck. Graham turned toward his mother. You haven't seen it? Marianne shook her head. Lena slid a hand toward the folder, as if paper could steady the moment. Maybe it was something else. We don't need to make this about one package. No, I said. We don't. I reached into my shirt pocket and unfolded one page from my notebook. Not the statements. Not a printed receipt. Only my handwritten list of delivery times and camera positions. But I'd like to know why the porch camera keeps turning toward the hydrangeas whenever packages arrive. Tessa set the serving spoon down carefully. That camera is cheap, she said. It drifts. No, it doesn't. You don't have the app, Walter. You don't know what it's doing. I don't need the app to know when a camera body has been turned by hand. Lena gave a small sigh. Dad, this is exactly why we need structure. You're under stress. And small things can start to feel connected when they aren't. I looked at her then, really looked. She was composed, as always. Cream sweater, neat hair, reasonable tone. But beneath the reasonableness was a door she did not want opened. Small things are connected all the time, I said. That's how systems work. Graham shifted in his chair. What are you saying? I'm saying, I want to understand what's being delivered to this house under your mother's name. Tessa's face hardened for half a second before she recovered. I am not going to be accused at a dinner table after spending 2 weeks taking care of this family. No one accused you, I said. You implied it. I asked a question. That's how it starts with people who don't want help, she said, turning toward Graham now. They question everything. They get suspicious. They think everyone is trying to take something. The sentence was meant for him, not for me. Graham heard it. I saw that he did. His eyes moved from Tessa to Marianne, then to the sofa bed still unfolded in the living room behind us. The blanket was there. The plastic bin was there. The little bell Tessa had placed on the side table was there, shining under the lamp like a prop. For the first time, Graham seemed to see the whole room at once. Not as a setup, as a displacement. Marianne spoke before anyone else could. I haven't slept in my own bed for 11 nights. Her voice was small, but it did not tremble. Graham's face changed. It was not dramatic. No tears, no sudden apology. Just the look of a man whose mind had finally stopped protecting him. 11? He said. Marianne nodded. I thought... He looked toward Lena. I thought it was just a few nights. Lena's mouth tightened. It's temporary. 11 nights is temporary? He asked. Tessa pushed back from the table. I won't sit here and be treated like some kind of criminal. No one had used the word criminal. That made it louder. She stood, gathering plates too quickly, though half of us had not finished eating. Lena rose with her. Let's all calm down, Lena said. But calm had begun to fail them. Graham remained seated. He stared at the brochure on the table, then at the hallway, then at his mother's hands folded in her lap. Mom, he said softer now. Do you want to go to assisted living? Marianne looked at me. I did not answer for her. She took a breath. No, she said. I want to sleep in my room. The simplicity of it stripped the table bare. No one could hide behind recovery plans or fall risks or family concern in front of that sentence. Lena closed the folder. This is getting emotional, she said. It should, I replied. For once, she had no immediate answer. The rest of dinner dissolved into small movements. Tessa carried dishes to the kitchen with sharp, controlled motions. Lena whispered something to her near the sink. Graham sat very still, looking older than he had when he arrived. When Lena and Tessa finally went down the hall toward the bedroom, pretending to gather paperwork and give everyone space, Graham stayed behind. The kitchen faucet ran. Cabinet doors opened. Their voices lowered behind the bedroom door. Graham stood and began clearing the plates from the table. His movements were awkward, almost boyish. He scraped food into the trash, rinsed forks, stacked plates in the sink, like he had forgotten where anything belonged. I joined him without speaking. For a while, the only sound between us was water hitting porcelain. Then he said, Dad. I turned off the faucet. He kept his eyes on the plate in his hands. What am I not seeing? I dried my hands slowly on a towel. There was a younger father inside me who wanted to spare him. To say it was complicated. To say we would handle it. To let him keep some clean version of his wife, his marriage, his choices. But that instinct had helped build this room. You're seeing it, I said. You just haven't wanted to call it by its name. He looked at me then, and for the first time in weeks, he did not look tired. He looked afraid. Good, I thought. Fear at least means the eyes are open. From the hallway, Tessa laughed softly at something Lena said behind the bedroom door. Graham flinched. Not much. Enough. Graham did not sleep at our house that night. He went home with Lena. Because marriages do not break open in one clean motion. They bend first. They creak. They make noises no one else hears. But before he left, he stood in our front hallway with his coat half on, staring toward the closed bedroom door where Lena and Tessa were whispering. I'll come back tomorrow morning, he said. Lena, standing behind him, gave a short laugh that was meant to sound tired. Graham, you have work. He did not look at her. I'll come back tomorrow morning, he repeated. That was the first useful sentence my son had spoken in weeks. After they left, the house became quiet in a different way. Not peaceful, watchful. Tessa moved through the kitchen with sharp little sounds, cabinet doors closing too firmly. A fork dropped into the sink, water running hard over dishes already clean. She did not speak to me. I did not speak to her. Marianne sat beside me on the sofa bed, her hands folded in her lap. She's angry, she whispered. She can be. She might make things worse. I looked toward the hallway. The strip of light under our bedroom door was gone now. Tessa had shut herself inside. That's why we do this properly, I said. Marianne looked at me then, really looked, as if the word properly had given her something to hold on to. She was frightened, but not the way she had been before. Fear changes when it has a direction. The next morning, Graham arrived at 8:15. He had not shaved. His eyes were red around the edges, and his tie hung loose under an open collar. He looked like a man who had spent the night arguing with himself and losing to the truth one piece at a time. Lena was not with him. That mattered. Tessa saw him from the kitchen and straightened. Graham, I didn't know you were coming. I told everyone last night. I thought maybe after work. I'm here now. His voice was not loud. That made it stronger. Marianne was sitting on the sofa with a mug of tea. When Graham crossed the room, she reached for his hand. He bent and kissed her forehead, but there was a hesitance in him now, a carefulness. He was beginning to understand that affection did not erase failure. "Mom," he said softly, "I need to go somewhere with Dad for a little while." Tessa stepped forward. "Where?" "The bank," I said. The word entered the room like cold air. Tessa blinked once. "Why?" "Because I have questions about our credit card." "That sounds like something you can handle by phone. I prefer to do it in person." She turned to Graham. "This is getting out of hand. Walter is upset, and now he's dragging you into it." Graham looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Maybe I should have been dragged into it sooner." Tessa's mouth closed. I put on my jacket and took the plain envelope from the coat closet. Inside were the statements from the library, the printed confirmations, and a copy of the notes I had made. Earl's USB stayed hidden for the moment. I did not want to carry everything at once until I knew who needed what. Before leaving, I knelt beside Marianne. "We won't be long." She nodded, but her eyes moved toward Tessa. Graham noticed. "I'll be back too, Mom," he said. "Today. Not soon. Not later. Today." It was a small correction. But small corrections matter when a house has been taken over by vague promises. The bank sat between a pharmacy and a hardware store in a low shopping plaza we had used for years. Marianne and I had opened our joint account there, back when Graham still needed help tying his shoes. The carpet inside had changed. The counters had been remodeled, but the place still smelled faintly of paper, coffee, and the little bowl of peppermint candies they kept near the waiting chairs. A woman at the reception desk asked how she could help. "I need to speak with Denise Mallory," I said. Denise had been at that branch for more than 20 years. She had once helped Marianne reverse a duplicate utility payment and had sent us a handwritten note when I retired from the hospital. She was in her late 50s now, with dark hair streaked silver at the temples and a voice calm enough to lower the temperature of a room. When she came out from behind the glass partition and saw me, her face shifted from professional to personal. "Walter," she said, "it's been a while." "It has." Her eyes moved to Graham, then back to the envelope in my hand. "Let's step into my office." Denise's office had one window facing the parking lot and a small framed photograph of the Oregon coast on the wall. She did not rush us. She did not ask questions in the lobby. She closed the door, offered coffee, then sat behind her desk with a legal pad ready. "What's going on?" I placed the envelope on her desk. "I need you to look at charges on our credit card. Some are ours, some are not. And I need to know who added a secondary phone number and backup email to the account." Graham shifted in the chair beside me. Denise opened the folder and began reading. She did not gasp. Bank people do not gasp when they are good at their jobs. They become still. She spread the statements in date order and ran one finger down the charges. Beauty supply, gift cards, online marketplace, pickup locker, electronics accessory, apparel, another gift card, subscription service. "Did Marianne authorize these?" she asked. "No." "Did you?" "No." She turned to Graham. "Did you?" He looked ashamed before he answered. "No." Denise nodded and typed into her computer. The clicking of her keyboard seemed too loud in the small office. "I'm going to pull the account change history." Graham leaned forward. "You can see that? We can see when contact information was added or modified, what channel was used, and sometimes which authentication method approved it." He sat back slowly, absorbing that. Denise's eyes moved across her screen. A crease appeared between her brows. "There was a secondary mobile number added 8 days ago," she said, "and a backup email address added the same day." She read the last 4 digits of the phone number. Graham closed his eyes. It was Lena's number. Denise did not ask whose it was. She saw our faces and understood enough. "This does not automatically tell us who made the purchases," she said carefully. "But it does create a serious concern about unauthorized access, especially given the pattern of transactions." "Can you stop the card?" I asked. "I'm blocking it now." She typed again. Something about the sound steadied me. The click of keys. A system doing what systems are supposed to do when someone finally names the problem. Denise printed a fraud affidavit and turned it toward me. "We'll need you to identify which charges you dispute. I also recommend placing an alert on the account and changing all online credentials immediately." Given your ages and the circumstances you're describing, I'm also going to flag this internally as possible elder financial exploitation. Graham flinched at the phrase, elder financial exploitation. People soften many things until the official words arrive. Then the thing sits there under fluorescent light, plain and ugly. Denise looked at him, not unkindly. That does not mean we are accusing anyone in this room of anything. It means the pattern requires protection. I gave my wife access to the camera system, Graham said quietly. And maybe other things. I thought I was helping. Denise's voice stayed level. Many cases start with someone thinking they are helping. The sentence landed hard because it did not accuse him. It left him no place to hide. While I signed the affidavit, Denise stepped out to make copies. Graham sat beside me with his elbows on his knees, staring at the carpet. Dad, he said, why didn't you show me sooner? I kept my pen in my hand. Would you have believed me? His jaw tightened. I don't know. It was not the answer I wanted. It was the first honest one. Denise returned with a printed packet and a list of recommended next steps. She slid one page across the desk and tapped a line with her pen. You need to make a police report. Not because they will solve everything today, but because the bank will need a case number for the fraud process if this continues. And you should contact Adult Protective Services. Graham looked up. APS? Is that necessary? Denise's expression did not change, but her voice became firmer. Your parents are sleeping in their living room while a non-relative occupies their bedroom. Their account contact information was changed. Purchases appear to have been made without authorization. A caregiver figure is involved. Yes. It is necessary. There are moments when the truth sounds different coming from someone outside the family. Graham nodded slowly. Okay, he said. That word was small, but this time, it was not surrender. At the police station, the front lobby smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. A young officer behind the desk listened while I explained the situation, then called in an older patrol officer named Calvin Reese. Officer Reese was a broad man in his early 60s, close to retirement by the look of him, with tired eyes and a patient way of standing that suggested he had heard many families try to describe pain in legal terms. He did not interrupt much. He took my statement. He copied the bank packet. He asked about the packages, the camera, the account changes, and whether Tessa had permission to use our credit card. No, I said. Did she have permission to live in your home? For a few nights to help after my wife fell. And now? No. He wrote that down carefully. Not now. Those two words felt heavier than I expected. Graham gave his statement too. He admitted he had given Lena admin access to the camera system and believed Tessa had been helping. He did not make himself sound noble. He did not make Lena sound innocent. He simply said what he knew and what he did not know. That was the beginning of repair, though not forgiveness. Officer Reese explained that the report would document suspected unauthorized use of credit cards and possible elder abuse. He did not promise arrests. He did not promise a dramatic confrontation. He said investigators would review the financial records and video evidence. You'll also want APS involved, he said. They can assess the living situation faster than we can sort out every transaction. By the time we left, Graham looked drained. I felt older than I had that morning, but also steadier. The story was no longer trapped inside our family's language. It had a case number. On the drive home, Graham kept both hands on the steering wheel. I called Lena from the station, he said. I looked at him. What did you tell her? That I was bringing you home. That the bank froze the card. That a report was filed. And she said I was overreacting. Did you believe her? He took a long breath. No. We drove 3 blocks in silence. Then he added, she told me Tessa was crying. I looked out the window at the wet streets, the bare branches, the modest houses with their curtains half drawn. Your mother cried quietly for 11 nights, I said. He did not answer. When we pulled into the driveway, a white county vehicle was already parked at the curb. For one frightening second, I thought Lena had called someone first. Then the driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out carrying a leather folder and a state ID badge clipped to her coat. She was in her early 50s, with close-cropped black hair, warm brown skin, and the kind of calm posture that did not need to announce authority. Her coat was practical, dark, rain speckled at the shoulders. She looked at the house before she looked at us. "Mr. Hensley?" she asked. "Yes. I'm Marisol Grant with Adult Protective Services. Denise Mallory from your bank made an urgent referral, and Officer Reese forwarded the report." I had expected a phone call, not a person at the curb. Marisol's eyes moved from me to Graham, then to the porch camera above the door. "Is your wife inside?" "Yes. And is the caregiver inside as well?" I looked at the house. Through the window, I saw Marianne on the sofa. Tessa stood behind her, one hand resting on the back cushion, as if she belonged in the frame. "Yes," I said. "She is." Marisol nodded. "Then I'd like to speak with you and your wife separately if possible. And I'll need to see where everyone has been sleeping." Graham's face tightened, not in anger, in recognition. We entered together. Tessa was in the living room before the door fully opened. She saw Graham first, then me, then Marisol's badge. Her face rearranged itself quickly. Concern, confusion, offense. In that order. "What is this?" she asked. Marisol answered before I could. "My name is Marisol Grant. I'm with Adult Protective Services. I'm here to make sure Mr. and Mrs. Hensley are safe, and that their needs and wishes are being respected." Tessa let out a small, shocked laugh. "This is unbelievable. I've been taking care of them for 2 weeks." Marisol did not react to the performance. "I understand you've been assisting," she said. "I'll speak with you later. For now, I need to speak with Mr. and Mrs. Hensley." Lena arrived 20 minutes later. I did not know who called her. Tessa, most likely. She came through the front door without knocking, cheeks flushed, hair slightly windblown, carrying her purse like a shield. "What is going on?" she demanded. Graham stood up. For a moment, I saw the boy who had once been afraid to tell his mother he broke a window. Then I saw the man decide not to hide behind his wife. "Lena," he said. "Not now." She stared at him. "What?" "Not now." It was the first time I had heard him put a wall between her voice and our house. Marisol asked to speak with Marianne and me in the kitchen. Privately, Tessa objected. Lena objected more smoothly. Marisol simply repeated the request and waited. Officer Reese had given us a number to call if anyone interfered. I did not have to say that aloud. Perhaps Marisol saw it in my face. When the kitchen door was partly closed, the house became very quiet. Marisol sat at the table, not across from us like an interrogator, but at an angle, leaving space. She placed her folder down and folded her hands. "Mrs. Hensley," she said gently, "I'm going to ask you some direct questions. You can take your time. No one outside this room gets to answer for you." Marianne looked at me. I squeezed her hand, then let go. That was important. Marisol asked about the fall, about Tessa's arrival, about sleeping arrangements, about who controlled the bedroom, the medications, the phone, and the cameras. She asked whether Marianne felt pressured to stay in the living room, whether she had access to her own belongings, whether she wanted Tessa to remain in the home. Marianne answered slowly at first, then more clearly. By the time Marisol asked the final question, my wife's hands had stopped trembling. "Mrs. Hensley," Marisol said, "do you feel safe with Tessa Rowland living here?" Marianne looked toward the hallway, then at the living room, where the sofa bed was still open in the middle of the day, then at me. I did not nod. I did not lead her. She straightened in the chair. "No," she said. "I want my bedroom back." Marisol wrote it down. 5 words on paper, but I felt the whole house shift. For a few seconds after Marianne said she wanted her bedroom back, nobody in the kitchen moved. Marisol Grant lowered her pen to the paper and wrote the sentence exactly as my wife had spoken it. Not cleaned up. Not softened. Not translated into agency language. No, I want my bedroom back. There was a strange power in seeing those words become part of a record. For 2 weeks, Marianne's wishes had floated around the house like steam, visible only for a moment before disappearing. She had hinted. She had apologized. She had whispered to me in the dark. But now her words were on paper in front of a county worker whose job was not to comfort the loudest person in the room, but to listen to the one who had been made quiet. Marisol looked up from her notes. "Mrs. Hensley," she said, "I want to make sure I understand. You do not want Tessa Rowland to continue living in this home?" Marianne's hand tightened around mine beneath the table. "No," she said. "Do you want her to remove her belongings from your bedroom?" "Yes." "Do you want her to have access to your medications, phone, cameras, bank cards, or personal documents?" Marianne swallowed. "No." Marisol nodded once. No drama, no raised voice. Just a clear line being drawn. "Thank you." Those two words nearly broke my wife. Not because they were grand, because they were ordinary. Someone had asked what she wanted, and then thanked her for answering. From the living room, Lena's voice rose. "This is absurd. She is twisting everything." Tessa answered, quieter but sharper. I could not make out the words, only the tone. A cornered tone, the kind of sound people make when they still believe outrage can become innocence if performed with enough confidence. Marisol closed her folder halfway. "Mr. Hensley," she said, turning to me. "As homeowners, you and your wife have the right to tell Miss Rowland she is no longer welcome to stay here. Given the financial concerns, the sleeping arrangement, and Mrs. Hensley's statement, I recommend she leave today while we continue our assessment." I nodded. My throat felt tight. I had imagined this moment 100 ways in the previous 2 weeks. "In some versions," I shouted. "In some, I dragged suitcases down the hall. In some, Graham stood between Lena and us like a man suddenly made righteous by one hard night. But the real moment was quieter. It happened in our kitchen, beside a sugar bowl Marianne had bought at a church rummage sale, with rain tapping softly against the window and a county worker putting documents into a folder. Quiet justice rarely announces itself. Sometimes it simply asks a person to leave. Marisol stood first. I helped Marianne from her chair. She wanted to be present, and I understood why. If Tessa was leaving our home, Marianne needed to see it. Not from the sofa. Not from behind a closed kitchen door. From her own 2 feet. When we entered the living room, everyone turned. Tessa stood near the fireplace with her arms folded tight. Lena was beside her, face flushed, purse clutched against her ribs. Graham stood a few feet away from both of them, no longer between his wife and us, but not quite beside us yet either. That space said more than any speech could. Marisol spoke before anyone else could take control of the air. "Miss Rowland, Mr. and Mrs. Hensley, have stated that they no longer consent to you staying in this home. You'll need to gather your personal belongings and leave today." Tessa's mouth opened. Then she looked at Graham. That told me plenty. "Graham," she said, voice shaking now, "are you really going to let them do this after everything I've done?" Graham looked at her. I saw the old reflex in him, the urge to smooth it over, to lower the temperature, to become useful by becoming agreeable. Then his eyes moved to the sofa bed still unfolded in the middle of the living room. His mother's slippers sat beneath it. His mother's robe hung over the back of a dining chair. His mother's prayer book lay on the side table, displaced from the bedroom where it belonged. "I think you should get your things," he said. Lena turned on him as if he had slapped her. "Graham." He flinched at his name, but he did not retreat. "No," he said, "not this time." It was not a heroic line. It was not enough to erase what he had allowed. But it was a start. Tessa gave a bitter laugh. "Unbelievable. I give up 2 weeks of my life to help your parents. And this is what I get?" Marisol's voice remained level. "You are welcome to provide your statement. Right now, you need to gather your belongings." Officer Calvin Reese arrived 10 minutes later. Marisol had called him, not because anyone had been arrested, but because removing a disputed caregiver from an elder's home can become volatile. Reese entered without urgency, his uniform rain-dark at the shoulders, his presence steady enough to lower the chances of anyone doing something foolish. He nodded to me. "Mr. Hensley." "Officer." Tessa looked suddenly smaller when she saw him. "Not sorry, just smaller." She marched down the hallway toward our bedroom. Lena followed, but Reese held up one hand. "Miss Hensley, let her gather her own belongings." Lena's eyes flashed. "She's my sister." "And this is not your bedroom," he said. The sentence landed with a clean finality. For a moment, no one moved. Then Tessa went in alone. The bedroom door stayed open. That mattered. I stood in the living room beside Marianne. I could feel her trembling through the sleeve of my shirt. Not from weakness. From the violence of having to watch someone remove themselves from a place they should never have occupied. Tessa came out first with the rolling suitcase, then the tote bag, then an armful of clothes on hangers pulled from the side of the closet where Marianne's church dresses had been pushed back. She did not look at my wife while carrying them past. Good. I did not want Marianne to give her another apology. When Tessa returned for the last load, Officer Reese stepped into the hallway and asked her to leave the items that were not clearly hers until they could be sorted. "What is that supposed to mean?" she snapped. "It means anything belonging to Mr. or Mrs. Hensley stays in the house. It's just a cardigan." Marianne's blue cardigan was folded over Tessa's arm, the same one she had worn in Earl's video. For the first time that day, Marianne spoke before I could. "That's mine." Her voice was quiet, but clear. Tessa looked at the cardigan, then at Marianne. Something ugly crossed her face, quick as a shadow. Then she tossed it onto the armchair. "Fine." The cardigan landed crookedly, one sleeve hanging down. Marianne stared at it. I could not explain why that small blue sweater felt like the whole story. Maybe because it was soft. Maybe because it was ordinary. Maybe because theft often begins with money, but never stops there. It takes the sweater, the chair, the room, the right to say no. I picked it up and placed it gently across Marianne's lap. She pressed her hand to it as if confirming it had come back. Tessa left with Officer Reese walking behind her, not touching her, not hurrying her. At the front door, she turned once. "You'll regret this," she said. Marisol answered before I could. "Miss Rowland, do not contact Mr. or Mrs. Hensley while this matter is under review." Tessa looked at Lena. Lena looked at Graham. Graham said nothing. The door closed. The sound was not loud. It was enough. Lena stayed. That was the harder part. Tessa had been the intruder we could name. Lena was family by marriage, which made every boundary heavier. She stood near the entryway, anger and fear fighting across her face. "Graham," she said, "we need to talk." He looked exhausted. "We will. Not here. This is my family too." I stepped forward. "No," I said. "This is our home." Lena's eyes cut to me. "I was trying to keep them safe. By giving your sister access to our cameras?" Her face tightened. "By adding your phone to our bank account?" I asked. Graham turned his head slowly toward her. He already knew. But hearing it in the living room made it different. Lena did not answer quickly enough. Marisol took note of that. Officer Reese, before leaving, explained the immediate next steps. The police report would be updated with Tessa's removal. The bank investigation would continue. Any disputed items or transactions would be reviewed. APS would open a protective services case and follow up within days. For now, Tessa was not to return. Lena was not to access our accounts, devices, records, or keys. A temporary protective order would need a judge. A written safety plan could begin that day. Those words were less dramatic than revenge. They were stronger. Marisol stayed another hour. She helped Graham call the camera company and remove Lena and Tessa from the account. Graham's hands shook as he changed the password, then transferred primary access to me. I watched every step. He did not complain. He also called the bank with Denise's instructions and removed all secondary contacts. My phone remained. Marianne's email remained. No one else. When the camera app finally opened on my phone, the live feed showed the porch clearly. Walkway, steps, street, hydrangeas at the edge where they belonged. Not the center. The edge. I looked at that image longer than I needed to. Marisol noticed, but did not interrupt. After she left, only 4 of us remained in the house. Marianne, Graham, Lena, and me. The quiet was awful. Lena stood by the door, no longer holding her purse like a shield. Now it hung from her elbow. Useless. Graham spoke first. "I'm going to take you home." She stared at him. "You're choosing this?" He closed his eyes for a moment. "I'm choosing to stop pretending I don't see it." Lena's face changed. Not softened, changed. Your parents are turning you against me. No, Graham said. I did that myself by not paying attention. There was no clean victory in those words. Only damage becoming visible. Lena left with him, though not peacefully. Their voices rose briefly on the porch, then lowered as the door closed behind them. Through the camera feed on my phone, I watched Graham walk her to the car. I did not listen. Some reckonings belonged to other rooms. Marianne and I were alone. For the first time in weeks, truly alone. The living room looked like the aftermath of a long illness. Sofa bed open. Pill bottles in the plastic bin. Folded blankets. Tessa's system still everywhere. Even with Tessa gone. Marianne looked down the hallway. Can we see it? She asked. I knew what she meant. I walked beside her, close but not holding her unless she needed me. We reached the bedroom door together. For a long moment, she stood at the threshold. The room smelled wrong. That was the first thing I noticed. Not bad, exactly. Just wrong. Tessa's perfume clung to the air, sharp and floral. The bed was made with sheets we did not use. Marianne's reading chair had been pushed toward the corner. Her nightstand drawer sat slightly open. A charging cord lay across my side of the bed. Marianne did not cry. She walked to the dresser and touched the place where her hairbrush used to sit. She moved everything, she said. We'll move it back. Her eyes went to the bed. I had thought the hardest part would be getting Tessa out. I was wrong. The hardest part was seeing Marianne stand in her own bedroom, as though asking permission to enter. I opened the window. Cold Oregon air moved through the room, carrying the stale perfume toward the screen. Then I stripped the bed. Pillowcases. Sheets. Blanket. I placed everything Tessa had used into a clear plastic bag Marisol had given us for items that might need to be documented. I did not throw anything away yet. Properly, I reminded myself. We do this properly. Marianne sat in her reading chair while I worked. After a few minutes, she reached down and pulled her blue cardigan tighter around her shoulders. I thought I was being kind, she said. You were. Maybe too kind. I stopped folding a sheet. No, I said. She used your kindness. That is not the same thing. Marianne looked at me, and for the first time since the fall, I saw anger in her face. Not loud anger, not the kind that burns a room down, the kind that protects what is left. Then I want my prayer book back beside the bed, she said. Yes, ma'am. That made her smile a little. I brought the prayer book from the living room and placed it on her nightstand. Then her lamp, her water glass, her bookmark, her small dish for earrings. Each item returned, like a name being restored. By evening, the room looked almost like ours again, almost mattered. There would be more to do. Bank reviews, police follow-ups, APS visits, a possible court order, Graham's marriage cracking under the weight of what he had ignored, money we might recover and money we might not, trust that would not return just because people wanted it to. But that night, I helped Marianne into our bed. Our bed. She sat on the edge for a moment, one hand on the quilt, as if she needed to feel its truth. Then she lay down slowly. I turned off the lamp and left the bathroom light cracked the way she liked it. The house settled around us with old, familiar sounds. The furnace, the refrigerator, rain beginning again outside. After a while, Marianne reached for my hand under the covers. Walt? I'm here. Lock the bedroom door. We had never locked our bedroom door before. Not once in 32 years. I got up and turned the small brass lock. The click was soft. But in the dark, it sounded like the house learning our names again. Weeks passed before anything felt normal. The bank reversed some charges and kept others under review. Denise called twice. Always careful, always precise. Officer Reese updated the report when new delivery records came in. Marisol returned with forms, safety recommendations, and a way of speaking to Marianne that made room for her answers. A temporary protective order kept Tessa away from the house while the investigation continued. Lena was barred from accessing our accounts, cameras, medical information, or entering the home without written permission. She was not arrested that week. Real life does not always hand you a clean ending on schedule. But the door was closed to her, and this time the lock belonged to us. Graham came by alone on Sundays. At first he knocked. That was his idea. "I don't want to assume I can just walk in," he said. The first time he said it, Marianne cried after he left. Not because the words fixed everything, because he understood, finally, that access was not the same as love. I did not forgive him all at once. Neither did Marianne. Forgiveness, like trust, is not a light switch. It is a porch rebuilt board by board after rot has been cut away. One Saturday morning, Earl came over with banana bread wrapped in foil. He stood on the porch, glanced up at the camera, and gave it a little salute. "Looks like it's watching the right thing now," he said. "It is." I had reinstalled the system myself. Main access on my phone. Backup access for Marianne. Emergency contact permissions documented through APS. Earl had a limited alert link for exterior motion only, because he had earned that trust by not asking for more than he needed. Independence, I had learned, did not mean no one could help you. It meant help did not come with possession. Marianne was in the bedroom when Earl arrived, sitting in her reading chair by the window. Sunlight fell across her lap and the open book resting there. Her blue cardigan was around her shoulders. Her prayer book was back on the nightstand. The hydrangeas outside the porch were beginning to recover from the rain. I poured coffee in the kitchen and carried 2 mugs down the hall. She looked up when I entered. There was still tiredness in her face. Still hurt. Some nights she woke and asked if the front door was locked. Some mornings she went quiet for no reason I could see. But she was in her chair, in her room. Her room. "Earl brought banana bread," I said. "That man bakes when he worries." "He does." She smiled. I handed her the mug with blue forget-me-nots painted around the rim. For a while we sat without speaking. Outside, the porch camera watched the walkway, the steps, the street. The hydrangeas sat at the edge of the frame, exactly where they belonged. Not hidden, not centered. Just part of the view. I thought justice would feel like triumph. It did not. It felt like a locked door, a restored password, a returned sweater. My wife reading by the window while coffee cooled in her hands. It felt like being allowed to live quietly in the house we had already earned, and after everything, that was enough. Sometimes, the deepest hurt does not come from losing money, but from being made to feel like a guest in the life you spent years building. Walter and Marianne's story reminds us that kindness should never require surrendering your dignity. Real care protects your voice. It does not silence it. And sometimes, God's grace shows up quietly through a neighbor who notices, a friend who remembers, or one honest question that helps someone finally speak. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever seen someone mistake control for care? And if you want more stories of quiet strength, family truth, and peaceful justice, please subscribe. May your home be safe, your voice be heard, and your heart find peace.